space, and then we'll get started in a minute. All right, and I'm going to go live on YouTube too, so we can catch all the people out in the interwebs. But welcome, Conan. We're going to get started in just a second. Zoom can be slow to let people in, but this is amazing. Thank you all for coming out on a Saturday evening. This is amazing. Hello, hello. All right, we will go ahead and get started, and then as people come in, they will come in. Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Kerfoot. I am the events director at Politics and Prose Bookstore in DC, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's virtual event. And yes, we are still virtual. We're 18 months in. We're still doing this thing on Zoom. Let's rock and roll. Before we begin, just a couple technical details to go over. First, I'm going to drop a link in the chat so you can purchase a copy of Matrix straight from Politics and Prose's website. And we ship to anywhere in the United States, but if you live in the DC area, you can select in-store pickup from any of our 3 store locations. And we should have plenty of signed copies as well, which is such a treat. So make sure you get one of those before they go. It is also our member sale this weekend. So if you are a member with Politics and Prose, you get 20% off almost everything in the store and online. And I can drop a link for where you can become a member if you're not one already. It's $25 a year and the benefits are endless. So definitely check that out. Next, if you have a question for the author, please submit it in the Q&A space instead of the chat, just to make sure that Hernan sees it properly. And we will get to those in the latter portion of the program, but you can submit your question at any time, including right now. All right, let's move on to the show. I am so honored to introduce tonight's event. As everyone at Politics and Prose knows, I am a huge Lauren Groff fan, and this book is so brilliant, and you are all required to buy it immediately. Lauren Groff is a 2-time National Book Award finalist and the New York Times bestselling author of 3 novels, including the smash hit Fates and Furies, and the short story collections Delicate Edible Birds and Florida, one of my all-time favorite books ever. Her new book, Matrix, follows a nun who is cast out of the royal court and banished to a failing 12th century abbey, ultimately leading it to prosperity. It is ultimately an exploration of the raw power of female creativity in a corrupt world, and isn't that just so timely? Moderating the conversation is Hernan Diaz, a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction and the PEN/Faulkner Award. His novel Trust, about wealth and talent, trust and intimacy, and truth and perception, will be published by Riverhead in 2022, and I will put a link in the chat where you can pre-order that book as well. So without further ado, I turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
We love Politics and Prose.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
So lovely to see you after such a long time.
The same. I love seeing your face. I just want to squeeze it.
This is the most intense reading experience I've had in forever. I have read your work with reverence and pleasure for years, and you are one of the finest stylists working in the English language today. But your books miraculously are never cold cathedrals. They're always full of emotion, they're full of truth, and nowhere does this conjunction of emotion and truth and beauty show itself more brightly than in this book, to my mind. And leave it to you to address some of the most urgent issues of today through a story set in a convent almost 1,000 years ago. But this is, I am not being hyperbolic. This is the most moving piece of contemporary fiction I've read in forever. It's masterful. And this gorgeous book is made of so many exquisite tensions that I hope we'll get to discuss tonight. the archaic and the contemporary, the divine, the terrestrial, the factual, the fictional, and the political and the lyrical. And I think one of the reasons why your novel is so masterful is because it refuses to resolve these dissonances, which is such a bold gesture. But shall we jump in? I have an initial thing that I would like to hear you talk about. I was rereading your book last night, and I came across this phrase that I will read, and it goes: nuns already are suspect, unnatural, sisters to witches. I feel something important deciphered here. Do you want to talk about this a little?
You want me to unpack that little thing?
Yeah.
I can't. Like, I'm still like smarting from embarrassment from your very, very sincere and beautiful words. Like, I'm actually like really red right now. Thank you, Erin. It means so much to me that you responded to this book. And I see in the chat. I will respond to your question, but you must pre-order a nun's book. I got to read it in manuscript. It is so brilliant. It is like Edith Wharton and Henry James had like a wild night and a baby. Which never could have happened. It's
very
so
kind.
good.
We're
love it.
not doing this right now. We're talking about Matrix.
Guess what? I just did it. Okay, so yes, Sisters to Witches. I think there's something very profound in just like vestigial distrust to women who control their own reproductive lives. I mean, this is very clear when it comes to what's going on right now in Texas and will be going on very, very soon in Florida. But if you think about what a witch is, what a nun is someone who chooses chastity, chooses not to engage in this commerce of the body. Mm-hmm. A witch is someone who people would go to in order to get abortifacients, right? Like in order to bring, like a lot of them were probably midwives, but they had power over the reproductive body. I mean, right. I think that makes people in power particularly stressed out and angry. Like to imagine autonomy, women having physical autonomy, as well as, you know, lifelong autonomy in the rest of the world as well. So I think the Sisters to Witches is like this professed idea that they're going to control reproduction. I truly like that. That's one thing too. But there's also like this this idea that witches and nuns are both stepping outside of these stringent hierarchical cages that society has sort of put women into. So yeah, that's my reading of my own words.
I think this is fascinating because there is also the perception that a nun is a captive of sorts, you know, and a prisoner of this monastic life. And I love what you just said, that this intersection between body and politics and the body politics is fascinating, and actually it's this wonderful sort of subversion of these preconceptions we have of nun life and what being a nun means. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, may like go on that, because I got very excited by what you just said.
Please.
Okay. So both historically, but also in the present day, nuns are extraordinary human beings. And I think nowadays, a nun will only go into her profession if she truly has a vocation for it, right? Like, this is not something anyone takes lightly because of this perception of the world. And so the nuns that I've met, and I stayed at an abbey in order to research this book, and I met these like geniuses. Like, these nuns have PhDs in everything you can imagine. Like, they're so smart, and they chose this life because it was the best way that they knew to live and to spend their one, you know, Mary Oliver life. But you know, back in through time, I think also that, you know, especially in the medieval ages, I think there was there was really only one career path for a woman, right? And that was to be like a producer of babies, right? She would just have a baby, or she would be a prostitute, or she could take a step outside of these boundaries and become a nun. And so that a lot of times there was a choice. Sometimes women were relegated to convents and nunneries because they disappointed their families, because they're political prisoners. Like, there's a whole spectrum. But I think to have the option to not buy into this commerce of the female body, that was also a big deal too. And so I'm just like playing with what you had just said, where the perception is that nuns are enclosed, encased, cloistered into this life. I feel like that's the opposite of my perception of taking a vocation.
Right, but in a way, also this idea of being encloistered is something that is crucial in your book. I think there's one of the biggest turning points in the novel, and I'm pretty sure I'm not spoiling anything by saying this, is when Marie decides that to turn her exile and her confinement into a willingful confinement and sever the ties of the abbey from the world, unmoor it from the rest of this hostile community that is at its shores, right? And I was thinking utopian communities and utopia itself in Thomas More's novel was a peninsula. It becomes a utopia when it severs that isthmus that connects it to the mainland. And I thought that was fascinating, that gesture of creating this labyrinth. Also, I'm a Borges head, so give me a labyrinth. I'm very happy. Yes. But I thought there was almost a negative idea of freedom in the book, a freedom that is enhanced by the thickness of the walls, paradoxically.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true probably for a lot of women of the time, right? Like the farther away that they had to be from the dictates of their families, from like the need to get married, the better. And in fact, after a lot of women just had their lives, they had their children, possibly their husbands were dead, possibly they didn't like their husbands, they would choose to spend their retirement years, a lot of them in abbeys and nunneries, right, in convents, because it's a peaceful place, right, and it's a place surrounded by other women who understand possibly a little bit more about what you've lived through. So yeah. I think that taking a step away sometimes does give you more freedom, or there's a freedom in form, right? If we're talking about, for instance, anything, if we're talking about poetry, there's like this wild freedom in choosing a sonnet because it inspires ideas that couldn't happen without a container, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, but that pull between constraints and liberation is fascinating, and I think it conforms a lot of the book. And speaking of this peaceful space where also scholarship has a big part, and I want to talk about writing in the book, the role that writing has in the book in a second. But first, because it's something that you just brought up, and I wanted to ask you this, and I think I put it to you in an email when I first read the book. We totally deserve it, but men seem to have been banished completely from the book. I think it's a felicitous decision. I'm all for it, but they're like shadows of men, the superiors, right? But they're disembodied. They're really not in the book. Do you want to tell us a little bit how this came to be? I mean, I'm sure it goes beyond the obvious fact that, of course, there aren't men in a convent.
I mean, there would have been, right? This is definitely fanciful on my part. I think
Oh,
there
really? There
always
would have been?
there always would have been a priest giving mass, right? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
right.
It's like there always would have been superiors coming in, and they do in the book. But you're right; it was very, very intentional to sort of let the men be a mist at the edge of the page. Right? Like, it's just like a shadowy mist, crawling on the ground. And it wasn't, I think multiple things went into it. Right before I had sort of the vision of Matrix, I was riding back on a plane from somewhere, and I watched this incredible 1940s movie called The Women. And The Women is like extraordinary. It's such a good, like well-written, well-acted, brilliant movie. But the whole premise is that the only actors in this movie are women, which is great, right? So exciting, except I kept getting angrier and angrier because every single conversation was about a man, right? Everything was sort of circling around this idea of these absent men.
I know this movie, yes.
Yeah, it's a great movie. But like, come on. So and I think, there have been, I was just politically like at the end of my tether that when this book announced itself to me, at the end of like the Trumpy years, which I hope don't come back, I really couldn't function anymore. I was just like this like pale ghost of myself. And every time that like oleaginous voice came on the radio, I actually feel like I got hives on my body. Like I couldn't turn it off quickly enough. So it was partially with this like feeling of just absolute glee that I cast men out of this book.
Yeah.
But also, I kind of like I wanted a book that was only the female gaze, right? Like so is the female gaze any different from the male gaze, or do we also internalize the male gaze because that's what we've been surrounded by and told in our entire lives? And I think the answer is probably yes. Yes to both.
Yes to both.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah.
But Marie, the protagonist, is a politically complex figure herself. We were talking about the unnameable ex-president, and Marie is. I mean, she's no saint either. She is fiercely effective. She is and protective of her own. She's defiant of the patriarchal order ruling the church. She's a master diplomat, a reformer, even a revolutionary, right? But she's also an autocrat. Like she says, at one point in the book, she says something like, there couldn't be another Marie in this abbey because that would be a disaster, and free-thinking nuns are a danger. Like this, these are things she says. So I appreciated that you didn't sort of beatify or sanctify her. You give her a lot of darkness too.
I think her darkness is human darkness, right?
Yes.
I mean, like but she, and her darkness comes out of what happens when we're all exposed to a little bit of power, right? I really like, and I don't know that power, absolute power corrupts absolutely, or whatever the quote is, but I suspect that's probably true, or the maintenance of power possibly is the thing that corrupts, And so to go back to something that you said earlier, Marie uses writing and reading as she wields this as a weapon against her own nuns in a certain way too, right? Only a select few are allowed to be in the scriptorium, like writing and reading. She maintains for herself this like vast gift of reading in silence, which at the time, everyone who read would have read out loud. That's just the way that reading was, I think, in back in the day. And like it was like witchcraft to be able to read in silence. But the thing about reading in silence is I really do believe it gives you like an internal landscape that is different from sort of letting words out loud. in public view, right? And she receives letters that are for herself, which is very much against the Benedictine rule. What is not allowed to get things for oneself, right? Everything should be shared, including, at the time, letters addressed to the abbey. When one was writing a letter, even as an abbess or a prioress, when one was writing a letter, it had to be sort of sealed with another nun so that they know exactly what's happening. And so it's like it's public information, public knowledge. So Marie, as an autocrat, keeps these things fiercely for herself, and it's profoundly unfair, I think. Profoundly immoral in some ways.
But let's circle back to writing, because it's of course a favorite topic, and what happens with text, with words, and the way they circulate in the novel was fascinating to me. Of course, Marie is a poet, so that's one of the first relationship to language that we witness, is this very intense, passionate, aesthetic, loving relationship to language. But then also language is related. There's an economy of language. The monastery makes a nice coin at making copies. There is also sort of an administrative dimension of language, accounts that are kept, bookkeeping. I loved your spies that are sent out and come back all the time, presumably also carrying the written word. So in short, there seems to be sort of a triangulation between language, aesthetics, and politics and power in the book that seems very important to me. Is this something you would like to talk to us a little more about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely there, and it's also there not only and I love the ways that you describe that, but also, I mean, there would have been negotiations between languages in sort of a hierarchy of languages at the time too, and not just language,
tongues or different registers,
different tongues, because so the people of England spoke English, right, Old English, but after the Norman conquest, all of their rulers spoke French, and then the lingua franca was, of course, Latin. Right, but also if you came from different parts of France, you would be speaking different kinds of French. So Breton is very, very different from Languedoc or Languedoc, right? Like they're wildly different tongues, and so there'd be sort of a jostling for the hierarchy of language, which and languages, which would one would have to negotiate if one were in the upper echelons of power, especially with Marie, who, when she first got to England, didn't speak any English, right? She only spoke French, which was fine in the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine, but not fine when she had sisters who were dying of starvation that she had to try to save, right? She had to have, or there were people on the lands who were not paying the abbey their due, and so she had to negotiate with these people without necessarily speaking the language that they spoke. So it was there, yes. So that's one aspect of the linguistic issue, but also, and I got this from this amazing talk by my friend, Dr. Katie Bogus, where this book actually came out of. We're at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Studies together, and I sat at this lecture she gave about the liturgical practices of nuns in the Middle Ages. It was so exciting, right? Like when you get the gift of sitting in the presence of someone who's just so passionate and knowledgeable about what they do, it just sort of pours into you. It's like you're getting a vision from someone else. But she was talking, she was talking about this one point during the lecture. She was talking about how for a long time scholars didn't believe that nuns wrote at all or were engaged in the writing of their own liturgies. And then she was talking about this manuscript, and I can't remember what manuscript it was, where someone had gone in and changed the Latin masculine endings to feminized ones because they're using this in their own liturgies, right? And that's so moving, right? To imagine someone coming in and being like, you know what? not talking about men here, we're talking about women. We're going to change the Latin to sort of encompass our reality also. And I was just like, okay. And that maybe that might have been the point where I was like, okay, I need to write this book. And it had a lot to do with power and language and institutional power and subverting that in some ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am. This is fascinating, and I am not a medievalist, but I do know that that very little is known of the real. Yes. Of the real Marie, and that made me also think of Sappho, another foundational poet, of whom virtually nothing is known and only fragments are extant, and. Was this, since you were talking about the genesis of the project right now and this lecture, was this, were these voids something productive to you? Like, was that a plus?
Yeah, so I didn't know how to do it. I was actually really cowed a little bit. I mean, I went back and I read the historical fiction that actually mattered very, very dearly to me, like the Hilary Mantels of the world, the Penelope Fitzgeralds of the world, and I was trying to see what they were doing, but I didn't know how to animate someone who didn't leave anything in the historical record other than her own work. So I went back to her own work, right?
Yeah.
And I went to the Lay, which is her collection of amazing, fantastical, basically short stories in poetic form based on Breton songs and stories that this mysterious person, Marie de France, who is an actual person, an actual French, the first female poet in French that we know of. And I went back to the Lay and I went back to the fables. And in order to try to just like grasp something of the person, I did the opposite of the biographical fallacy, and I plucked out images and ideas and maybe turns of phrases too from these things, and built like a little, I guess like a matrix, like a substructure of, it was basically a prose poem on which I sort of built a biography, and from the biography the book was born. But I didn't know how else to do it, right? Like it was just and so if you go through the book, I think most of them remain in the text. There are these little images, these little ideas that come out of both of her two books. And I know some people say that she wrote another one. Some people say that she didn't actually write the fables. There's, but historians are, really? They still argue about it. But we know that she wrote the Lay. We just don't know who she was. We know that she wrote the Lay. We just don't know. She could have been an abbess. She could have been one of the daughters of Eleanor from her first marriage to the King of France, Louis XVII, I think. She could have been, who knows? Who knows who she was, right? So some illegitimate daughter of the nobility or the royalty of the time. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, this makes me want to go a little deeper about you mentioned historical fiction right now, and to me that is a very problematic and sometimes even like objectionable category for a number of reasons.
What are the reasons? I want to hear. What are your reasons for objecting to historical fiction?
What is non-historical fiction?
Yeah,
that's the first one.
I mean, I guess fiction written.
I've never read a historical fiction, so
a historical fiction. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I've never in my life. Yeah, I mean, even if you read science fiction, there's an idea of future there that is very much historical.
Oh, that's brilliant. Wait, have you ever read? Oh, sorry, I just got very excited. Have you ever read Henry James's response to Sarah something Oren Jewett? She's a writer of the Country of Pointed Firs, I think that's what it's called. But she sent him her book, and basically he writes this very kind, like blistering note about how
blistering note.
I know. It's like, you're a wonderful writer, but the whole project of historical fiction is corrupt at the core, and so like your book fails on any terms. It's like the worst thing.
I'm glad that was the kind note.
I know.
Yeah. He went with the kind option.
So So I mean, like, this is the prejudice that people have, right, with historical fiction, and it comes out of like a squeamishness about how there's. I think the like the summation of his point was that because you cannot actually put yourself into the mindset of the people at the time, it's going to be false from the beginning, right? Like, because it's impossible to actually develop the minds of like a 12th century nun. It's just a corrupt form, which is obviously like bullshit, right? Sorry, but because that's not the point, right? The point of, in my mind, the stuff that actually works, like Trust, your amazing book, is something where the past and the present are vibrating together, right? Like the moment that the book is being written is actually speaking very loudly into the past, and the past is speaking very loudly into the. So there's this back and forth that's happening, and that's what's making the book sort of come alive and be interesting and important. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree, and I think also one of the issues with historical fiction and why all fiction is to a certain extent historical is because we are engaging with this historically determined institution that is language. So if you're a responsible writer, you have to intervene critically in the history that is sedimented and ossified in not just lexically in the words, but also in grammar itself, and because power is ingrained there too. So if I think that's a way of engaging with history that interests me more, that has to do with an intervention into language. But since we're
amazing. Wait, can you just take that and like actually explain it? Like how do you decalcify language and the power structures in it through historical fiction?
Oh, right. No, I think there's a number of ways. I think the first and most obvious one is to display them, to put them in display. Mm-hmm. I think it also has to do with sort of denaturalize them and try to do a certain archaeological work with language itself, mm-hmm. and try to bring those ossified things back to life. And for me, but enough about me, it also has to do with inherited literary forms. I'm very mm-hmm. interested in genre, I'm very interested in that, and history kind of sedimented in those forms. And if you take them and mess with them and subvert them enough, I think, and crack them open, I think you see sort of the rings, the historical rings in that kind of trunk, and yeah.
I so agree. We're on the same page. This is so exciting.
And you do it here. And I was again rereading the book, and it feels it has this archaic feeling, and also sort of the medieval excesses are there too, because there was that side of it too, like the grotesquerie almost of those times, right? So all of that is there, but you never fetishize any of it. Like, it would have been so easy to write like a ye olde thing, and you don't do that. And it would also have been equally easy, and that, again, that's a way of engaging, I think, with language in a critical way. Mm-hmm. And then you could also have like indulged in a number of anachronisms, and you didn't do that either. It's perfect. You walk this razor thin line, and I don't know how you do it. And the other wonderful thing that embarrassingly dawned to me, like 20 minutes before the event, I was frantically reading the book for the 9th time, and I had this vision, this epiphany, which is it's like the purloined letter. It's obvious, it changed everything. The book is in present tense, which is so wonderful, and you have this 1,000-year-old narrative impressive that does so much.
Yeah, but also all the quotes are in indirect language, and I did that because it would have been impossible to deal with the fluctuation between French and English and Latin, right? Like it would have been so dumb, but also it would have been yield like the language, right? In order to keep it like fresh, I kind of had to make it tell its slants a little bit in direct language. Yeah. So it is present tense, and it wasn't. That was not a decision that I made until deep into probably the fourth full rewrite.
Get out.
And no, but I mean,
So was it in past tense, and in the first draft you?
The first three whole drafts I did, and I was like, why does it feel so musty? Right? It feels like it's been stuck in a chest for like 1,000 years, and the moths have eaten it. Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it does so much work. That present tense holds it's crazy. Yeah,
it is crazy.
But how amazing it is to me that this happened, and what a bold move to make such a profound shift in what did you say, third or fourth?
Yeah, for the fourth. But you should see my drafts are all broken, like one after the other. I'll do something and I'll just break it with the next draft, and I'll do something and break it with it. That's what I do. Like we write very differently. I think that you're very, very careful. Like you probably write a sentence and don't move on until that sentence is perfect. Is that right? I feel like that's the way that you are.
Yeah.
That's not me. No, I'm like a kid, but like in like a store late at night, someone locked me in there, nobody knows I'm in there, and I'm just like grabbing stuff and like throwing it around and having so much fun, and like eating the candy at the cash register. Like that's the way that I write.
That's an amazing image. Oh, that's so wonderful. That's so wonderful. But I do look, you remember you gave me one of these?
Yes, I did. You use it. I'm so
converted. No, I'm on like my 10th. So,
oh my God, they're the greatest. These are these huge Muji sketchbooks that I write and so does Hernan now, which makes me so very, very happy.
I think we should share this with everyone. If you write on large format, the world is better. And
the world is better.
Yes, and I owe this to Lauren, and I'm totally converted. Did you? I think we can open it up soon, but I'm sure people have questions. I haven't looked at the Q&A because I'm like in this moment. But did you? I have like a question because I'm curious to expand also my own canon, and I'm sure you will do that for me right now. I have a pen, I'm ready. So, yeah. So did you, I was thinking of the work of women that, whose art intersects with mysticism. And I was thinking of Hildegard von Bingen, which, is, I was thinking of Saint Teresa of Avila, of Sor Juana in Mexico, also foundational figure of Mexican literature. Hilma of Klint, I was thinking of even of Alice Coltrane, sort of artists for whom, the mystical and the aesthetic are one and the same. Did you live in this space of artists whose work kind of responds to this description? Are they people you love?
Yes. Every single person, every single one that you just said. And I think you knew some of those because we had a conversation up in New Hampshire about Hilma af Klint and Hildegard. Like I was deep in writing the book when I saw you up there. Yes, but also there is oh my gosh, Louise Bourgeois was one, right? Like she's someone whose language of sculpture really went into it. I'm not sure why. Like that's like a more of a distant, vague feeling. But she talks about the animal body in a way that I wanted all of these nuns to be inhabiting an animal body in a very real, very like filthy animal way, right? Like not filthy as in like gross, but filthy as in like allowing themselves to be animals, which I don't see often in contemporary literature all that much. Like Brandon Taylor calls it character vapor, which is like instead of characters, there's character vapor that passes through a lot of contemporary novels. I wanted my nuns to be solidly human, in their animal bodies. Who else? So yeah, all of the people that you mentioned. I got deeply into the female mystics of the Middle Age, Julian of Norwich, also in addition to the other ones that you were talking about. There are so many, and I'm now blanking on them all. I started listening to this is probably like stupid, but women covering Leonard Cohen songs, because I love Leonard Cohen songs. I think that they're actually mystical themselves, but I can't stand his voice. I think it's like horrendous, but I love the music when women cover his songs. I know. Sorry. It's like he just growls the whole time.
Yeah, no, it's not.
He's a great songwriter. But...
I'm not the one to like convert you here. Yeah, sorry.
There are so many. There's so many people went into this book. Actually, but that's what happens with every book, right? Like every book has an endless. I guess DNA sequence that's stolen from other people.
Yeah.
I
have more questions, but if I'm opening here, I am. Do you guys it's so
there too. Okay.
I can't get used to the Zoom sort of silence, but knowing that there are multitudes. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions, please type them in to the Q&A. I'm going to close this. Here is anonymous attendee. In your last book, The Collection Florida, one of my favorite pieces of writing now, one focus that unites your stories is woman. If I can be so reductive, Matrix continues this focus. Are you able to identify any other preponderances that are carried from Florida to Matrix?
Okay, but I'm the worst person to ask about this, actually, right? Because I think writers only know about their work what people tell them about their work, right? Our faces are pressed up very, very close to the rug. We can only see the fibers. We can't see the pattern. I don't know. I'm always excited about community. I have a book called Arcadia that's about other utopian projects. And as I was touring with Arcadia, I kept stubbing my toe in this idea that the only truly successful utopian projects are ones built around God. And so what does that mean? I mean, why? Why is that? Is it the regulation of the body? I still can't figure it out. Is it having one thing, a silent thing above you to focus on, right? So one thing that's greater than you. I don't know. So that obsession has sort of carried over into this. From Florida, I think, obviously I am haunted by climate change and the specter of climate change that exists in this book, because wherever there are humans, there's climate change, right? Yes. Like if you go into the woods, into like pristine woods, and you build a fire, you are affecting climate change because you are burning up things that otherwise would have rotted on the ground and become fodder for, the beasts of the forest. And you're putting smoke into the air, right? We are all engaged in climate change, whether or not we want to be. So what else? I don't know. Ernan, do you know? I think that's pretty good. 2 things.
No, I was about to say, I also think in both books, there are women, isolated women are a big presence. I think in of course in radically different ways, but I think that maybe is another sort of common denominator. I would dare to say. But I was also, that was one of the many things I wanted to discuss. We didn't get to. The importance that natural resources have in Matrix, to me, was absolutely fascinating, and the issue of water was also like something that I thought a lot about. I don't know if you said quite a bit about it already, but maybe there's something you want to add in that regard. Like, I think, sorry to cut in, because there's also, I'm so sorry, no, because I also feel there is this romantic, I was thinking of your small fire in the woods, and there is this romantic conception of the Middle Ages where, humans led a more sort of harmless life to the environment. Sorry.
No, but and they didn't, right? I mean, they did because they weren't plastics polluting everything. I mean, that is the thing that's going to kill us all, plastic. But yeah, I think it's an unfortunate, ugly gift of multiple kinds of the Catholic Church, and then after that, the Protestant Church, this idea of domination and not dominion, right? Dominion in Genesis is about taking care of nature, taking care of the animals and the beasts and of the field and of the sky. But domination is something that I think people have misinterpreted that line as forever. So you see, like, human domination of the natural world everywhere you go now. Clear cutting of the woods, it's all over the place. And I think there's this, people can look back at the teachings of the church in order to justify that, and it makes me very, very sad. So that's all I really want to say about that. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So can you see the Q&A scroll?
Again.
Do you want to? I don't see why I should be picking your questions. I think
I'll do it. It's fine.
I'm happy to do it, but
what's the difference between goodness and greatness and good and evil? Oh, that's a good question. I mean, that's a really difficult question. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I think, for me, I think greatness has more to do with force of personality, and like a feeling of being chosen, and like buying into the hero mythology that has existed through time, through the Bible, through Greek like heroic tales, like through all of narrative, basically, in recorded human history. So I think that greatness comes out of that, but goodness is very quiet. Goodness is constantly struggling and more often than not making the right decision, caring for other people more than you care for yourself, wearing masks, getting a fucking vaccine because it doesn't hurt you and it helps other people, right? Like doing things like for the community and not just being a selfish American. Right, like being good is considering the needs of others, not only the needs of others. Obviously, you need to take care of yourself and your own, but also not promoting yourself above other people. That's that. And then good and evil. That's like, I don't know. I think we should all maybe take a seminar on that. What is good and evil? I mean, my perception of that is kind of similar. Like, good is really just constantly struggling to toward light, and evil is giving up on what is moral and right and doing what feels good, right? Like, I really don't know. Or do you have an answer for this?
Oh no, the question was directed at you very clearly.
But you're smarter than I am. You step in and you say it.
There are lovely questions coming in. If you want to take a couple more, we have time.
All right. Paige says, "What brought me to Marie de France specifically as a vessel for this story? The truth is, I wanted to be a medievalist in college. I went to this amazing. Yes, I went to this amazing college in Massachusetts called Amherst College, where after my freshman year, I never took a class that had over 6 people in it. And starting sophomore year, half of the classes I took were just tutorials. I just go to like a professor I wanted to work with and be like, hey, I want to study this. And they'd be like, oh, okay. Like I was just like it was almost like an Oxfordian experience where, you sit down with a single person and just study things. And so I got to sit down with an amazing professor of mine, Dr. Paul Rockwell, and we did Ancien Français. And we I read and I translated a bunch of really amazing old French texts, and I finally found Marie de France, and she has been a passion of mine for 20 years now. I tried actually to do a translation of the Lay, but I was too timid. I read Maria Davana Headley's amazing new Beowulf. It's like so punk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's so good. And I read it and I was like, damn, right? Like I should have just done that. Yeah, the bro wolf, right? Yeah. Bro, right? But done something that's sort of that's a little cheeky, that's a little wild, that sort of brings newness back into the text instead of just a line by line thing. But there are plenty of really good translations out there already too. Nobody needs mine.
Which one? Do you have one that you would recommend?
No, I really just the ones that I use were actually still in French. I just have my old Gallimard edition up there, and it just yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, I guess it is.
There are a couple of more questions here. I don't know if you want to pick or I have more.
I do. I want to answer this one, if that's okay. Lindsay Boyles. Given short story collections and novels, I do both equally. What draws my focus to one medium versus the other at any given time? And when am I in the mood and groove to write short fiction? And when does a story demand a novel? Okay.
I want to know this too.
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite thing to talk about. Okay. So I have many things going on at once. Like I said, Hernan, I'm not a careful line by line writer like you. I am like a child, just going nuts. So I have 4 or 5 things always working, but I always have a novel, and my novel is the thing I wake up into, right? It's the thing I just want to go to every single day. It's my friend, right? You build that's very sad, but I think that I write because I'm lonely, and I write novels because I want to make my own friends.
Lauren, I know. You can call me anytime.
I do. I have plenty of friends, but I want one that's with me all the time, right? Like after I had 2 sons, and after I gave birth to them, I was kind of sad for it. Like I was like, I'm never going to be plural again, and I'm just a singular person. But no, with a novel you're plural because you have this thing to keep alive. So I love always working on at least one novel, and so, that's the thing that I think about when I'm running, when I'm in the grocery store or whatever. But I have ideas for stories. I have probably 3 dozen ideas for stories sort of circling around here in the back of the head. I will not write them because when they first come to me, because I've learned from past experience that if I push it, they just die on me. And then I have to throw them back into orbit, and they have to keep circling. So what I do is I wait until the story idea suddenly one day comes up against something else that sort of makes it burst alive. And it's like it falls out of orbit and hits a planet. And that planet is something that I've read, something that I've seen, something else, some other story idea that comes together and makes it explode. Then everything falls down over my eyes. I can't see the novel anymore. I can only see the story. And I try to sit down and I try to write the story, at least the first draft, in one burst of energy, right? It's like surfing one wave into shore. Because if you do that, you're just following the story. You're not imposing yourself on the story. And I think the imposition of ego is where a lot of books go to and stories go to die. So you just follow it in. And usually I have to do multiple other drafts in order to make it right. But then I have the story and it's out of me and it comes out of orbit and never shows up again. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's exciting, right?
Can I just say, did you say 36 ideas of short stories bubbling in your head?
Yeah. I just finished one that I'd had in me since the events in it happened when I was 19 years old. So like that's 23 years, 24 years.
And it's been simmering since?
Yeah, I've attempted to write it because I thought I found the collision thing and I haven't. And so I sat down, wrote the draft, and was like, well, that's bad. I like threw it. And it's not that it was bad. I probably could have worked in it to make it work, but it didn't have that vitality, that sort of like almost the vibrational sense of being alive, right? Which is the thing that you're looking for, particularly in a short story. You want it to sort of vibrate in a different way. And I think there are things that I've written before that I could slowly through time and persistence make work, but I don't want it to just work, right? I want it to actually breathe on its own terms and external to myself. And so that's why I put them away, and then they come back. They always come back, and that's beautiful, right? They always fall down again.
I love this, and it's also very encouraging to know that sometimes, and to hear you say that sometimes the best thing you can do is to partially forget about it for a while, or
that's the only thing to do. I think, a lot of times. Yeah. And then, if a story needs to be written, it will come back to you. I believe this fully. I think that they're actually, and I know I'm going to sound nuts, but I do believe this. I think they're actually living things, right? Like maybe they're somewhere between ghost and human, but they do come and they do sort of invade you, and you have to get them out of you in order to push them away. So I think that understanding that if they're powerful enough to be written, they will come back to you.
Well, all of this is taking us back to the realm of mysticism and inspiration and possession, bodily possession. Yes. So I suppose it's no accident that we ended here. I think this is all the time we have, unless you want to take another final question. Oh, here is Brittany. Hi, Brittany.
I know there's still so many good questions in there.
I know.
I wish this were like a 2-hour event. I'll ask this last one because I like to ask this just in general, and this will go to both of you. But what are you guys reading right now?
Yes. Ernan.
No, you go first.
Okay, I'm reading Joy Williams's Harrow because I have to do a thing. But I'm also reading, what am I reading? Oh, I can't talk about that. So let me think about what I can talk about and then go for it.
Okay, I am reading a couple of things simultaneously. I'm reading Life and Fate, which I've always wanted to read.
Oh, so good! I just read it. It's amazing.
You just read it?
Right?
Seriously?
It's like with Laura and Elliot, who's on this call. It's so good.
Okay, so can we have a little?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna talk about it. Okay.
Book club.
So
we'll have a little book club.
Yeah. I'm reading that, and I've started reading a couple of nights ago a book called Please Kill Me, and it's an oral history of the punk scene in New York.
Nice.
And it's incredible. I'm blown away. I'm talking to everyone about it, and nobody wants to hear me. But
I do. You tell me.
It's it's blowing my mind. These two books I'm really loving. How about you?
Okay, back to me. What did I? Oh my gosh! I just read Sarah Manguso's next book. It's a novel. It's called Very Cold People. It is absolutely freaking brilliant. It's just like it's gonna break your mind. It's all the people I grew up with, like eviscerated. It's like the most amazing book.
Wait,
you will love it. Well, it's called Very Cold People because it's about Northeasterners, people from the Northeast.
Oh, I hadn't heard about this. I love her writing. She's
so brilliant. Yeah, this is her first novel, right? Like she's generally a nonfiction writer, but this is so
and those
good.
Beautiful aphoristic. I love her works.
It's almost like Joe Brainerd's I Remember, but it's very Sarah Manguso. It's so good. I know.
Oh, I can't.
Which I would also recommend. I don't know if you read I Remember, but I feel like it would really vibe with you. I think you'd really like it a lot.
Okay.
It's
on the list.
Oh,
Wait,
good.
how about I want to know what the bookseller is reading.
Yes, what are you reading?
So I'm reading a couple things too. I'm reading Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder.
I read that. It's good. Yeah.
Really excited. And then I'm about to read Sally Rooney's new one, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I'm teaching a class for politics and prose on it in the winter. So I'm really excited to start that because I love Sally Rooney.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I read that.
Yeah, I'm excited. And then I have a huge TBR because as a bookseller, you get free books all the time, which I am not complaining about, but it makes you feel really guilty because there's so many great books that you can't read.
So many. Oh, you know the thing that I'm most excited about reading right now? It's Ovid's Heroides. I'm very, very excited about this. It's about like the female heroes.
Oh, love that.
Yes. Yes, it just came in the mail.
I mean, that vibes with your book, kind of. That's a good companion.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
I think I'll just write my own Heroides, maybe.
Thank you guys so much for doing this. This was so much fun. Elliot said it in the chat, but I agree. I could listen to you two talk all night. This is just so great. And the links are in the chat to pre-order Hernan's book. Comes out in 2022. And then, of course, to buy a copy of Matrix. I heard that we do still have signed copies at Politics and Prose, so get them before they are gone. And thank you all so much for spending this time with us. Thank you, Hernan and Lauren. Everyone go read this book immediately. Stay well and stay well read, and we will see you at the next one.
Thank you,
Hernan.